Hi, and welcome. My name is Michael Bartlett, Master Metaphysical Astrologer. Thank you for joining me and listening to my April 2024 astrological forecast. Please note that the dates and times I use are approximate. You may have to adjust them depending on where you live on the planet. Also, I use what's called a fourth harmonic viewpoint, meaning that I'm looking at the conjunctions, oppositions, and squares, meaning those sorts of aspects between the planets that create a bit of a tension or cause challenges in our lives. I do not focus on the moon except for when it comes to the eclipses. I feel that there are many astrologers out there covering the moon phases. I'd like to thank Christine Cianci, who is the painter of our Astro Theater figures, who you'll see throughout this talk on the forecast, and I use them quite frequently. And you can also find it in the book Astro Theater, available through Amazon and at your local bookstore. Our key themes for April. First and foremost, there's a four-sign planetary focus. It's been going on for a little bit of time now, and will be continuing on throughout the month, meaning that all of the planets in our solar system are all showing up just in four of the signs. We have a total of 12 signs, as you know, in the zodiac. So this means only 1/3 of the zodiac is being occupied, meaning there's a real strong focus in this quadrant of the zodiac. Mars goes retrograde on April 1st. There's a solar eclipse in Aries. We just had a March lunar eclipse with the moon in Libra and the sun in Aries. We will be having the second part of that eclipse, which will be the solar eclipse aspect, which will be happening coming up on the 8th. Sun, Venus, and Mars will be changing signs this month. And the only planet retrograde for the month is going to be Mercury. And there are two opening squares involving Pluto. Here we are on April Fool's Day, April 1st. Life's too mysterious. Don't take it serious. I love this card from Mary Engelbreit back in the 1980s. As we know, when Mercury or Hermes does his backwards movement, these are the times when we do things which begin with RE, like resting, relaxing, revisiting, researching, reconsidering, renegotiating, reviewing. These are all the things that are really good to consider during this time period. This is Mercury going retrograde in the sign of Aries. Also, there are the Sun and Chiron. So there's a little bit of a focus right now on this individuality of the Aries archetype. Aries, at the end of the day, is around the issue of the right to be. So with the Sun there, which is the way we shine out in the world, in Chiron, the way we teach, educate, and facilitate because of the wound or the issues that we have had to deal with in our lives, and Mercury are all in this place. It tells us that there's a bit of a focus on this. As we know, we also have the nodes in this placement. There's really quite an issue of dealing with what our individuality is, who we are as ourselves, and also who we are in relationship with one another. I believe a lot about what's going on with the astrology right now is finding this very careful balance between being our individualized selves and working as a collective in a way that works for all of us individually and collectively. On April 6th, we have Venus and Neptune in a conjunction. We also have Mars and Saturn there at this point. There's four planets in the sign of Pisces. This Venus Neptune is really dreamy and idealistic. Great time to go and see movies, to eat some of your favorite sweets if you can eat sweets, or any of your foods that you really get to enjoy that makes you feel good. Meditation is really highly indicated. Doing things around water, chanting, singing, doing artwork, anything like that can be really highly indicated by this position right now. Here on the 3rd of April, and actually that was the 3rd of April for that. Sorry, when we're going to have that Venus-Saturn conjunction. These are all the planets here. We start with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius at 1 degrees, almost 2 degrees of Aquarius, all the way to Uranus in Taurus at 20 degrees. So we have one sign of Aquarius, 2 signs Pisces, 3 signs Aries, 4 signs Taurus. So 4 signs that are really being a focus right now out of the 12, with the biggest focus being here in the sign of Pisces and in the sign of Aries. This will continue on off and on for the month. Of course, the one planet which will be moving around quickly during this time will be the moon. But by the time we get to the 30th of April, that moon will be coming back into this position, and Pluto will be up a little bit. So it'll actually be into 112 degrees. On the 4th of April, Venus is leaving the sign of Pisces and moving into the more personally identified sign of Aries, more instinctual. This gives us a stellium, Sun, Venus, Chiron, and Mercury in the sign of Aries. Real strong focus and force about what is it that we want to do? What is our instinctual nature telling us about what is the right thing to do? What is the right action to take? Venus has had its little rest in the sign of Pisces for a while, as you saw just a moment ago. And the third was in there with Neptune hanging out. So getting some really great ideas about maybe how to plan and do things that are better taking care of the self than usual for Aries. On the 8th of April, we have a solar eclipse at 19 degrees and 24 minutes of Aries, opposite of where it was in October of 2023 and around where it was last year in April of 2023. Is me activating the cardinal signs of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn from 11 to 29 degrees. So where does that happen for you in your chart? Meaning, do you have these cardinal signs? And also, do you have any planets in these signs? You're going to be feeling some activation, especially if they're within those degrees. What is the shadow that's being revealed to you? And then what are these themes that are appearing from October and April of last year? And as you know, how a solar eclipse works is when the moon is in between Earth and the sun, creating a shadow, making it seem that it completely blocks out the sun. Our moon is the exact right size and the exact right distance from our planet. An unusual occurrence here in our solar system, actually in the universe, I guess, that allows for this sort of a phenomenon to happen. If you go to nasa.gov, you can see the maps of where it's going to be hitting. So you can see it's coming up here from the northeastern part of the United States, going all the way down into the bottom of Texas. The October 23rd eclipse happened going in a diagonal, going from Oregon down through Texas and beyond. And so what we've got is a little bit of an X marks a spot down here in Texas. It's going to be very interesting what happens here. This area is just south and west of San Antonio, really close to the Mexican border. And if we look there, the closest city it really hits is Uvalde, which is where they had the mass shooting that killed all those children at the school, unfortunately. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of an energy that gets reactivated or gets open or we get seen or gets revealed in this place during this time. On the 11th of April, we have Mercury going retrograde and backing up into the sun, meaning that if we were to look at the sun, we would not really be able to see Mercury because it's completely blinding by the brightness of the sun behind it, and Mercury is so small. We call this Cazimi. So this is a time, again, this is still in that reviewing period. But Aries, as you can see, all these guys have their swords drawn, and lady, of course, with Venus, swords drawn, and they're ready. But what you find with Aries is Aries understands the cost of drawing the sword. So it's very rare for Aries to really fight, but they know what they want to do, and they'll actually probably most likely want to remove themselves from a situation. There's the RE actually, remove themselves from a situation. So if you're Aries, especially, you're probably going to need to take a little bit more time, a little bit more space, and realize that even though it feels like it's all about you, it really isn't necessarily all about you. On the 19th of April, Mercury is still going in its retrograde fashion, and the sun moves into the sign of Taurus, where the sun joins Jupiter and Uranus. This is a very solid, grounded, very purposeful sort of energy. It's not that same kind of spiky instinctual energy that was going on in Aries. But as you can see, we've got 3 planets in Aries: Chiron, Venus, and Mercury, and we've got 3 planets in Taurus: Sun, Uranus, and Jupiter. And so we can see that there's this kind of splitting of energies, kind of sharing and seeing, like, what is it like going from Aries and going into understanding and seeing what one's environment is, and maybe what the resources that might be available in the environment. While we've got all this Taurus energy going on, especially with Jupiter there and with the Sun, finding these little luxuries that we have in life, having an extra piece of cake or an extra little piece of chocolate, or treating yourself to something that's really important is nice. But just don't get lost in the idea of substituting that sweetness for other things that are going on. Although sometimes it is really nice to get a sweet when you've been having a really rough day. On the 20th of April, we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. This is big shock, big change, big new archetypes. Uranus has been hanging out in Taurus for quite some time now. Jupiter's doing its annual event there. Has been spending a lot of time because it was in a retrograde motion for a lot of last year. So he spent a fair amount in the sign of Taurus. These are big new forms when we come to Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus, finding these new ways of doing things, new ways of dealing with food, new ways of dealing with luxury goods, new ways of dealing with our resources, new ways of dealing with our investment choices. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the stock market on this day. I'm sure it'll be quite activated. On the 21st of April, we have Venus and Chiron in a conjunction. Mercury still retrograde into that Venus, who recently saw Neptune is coming in now into Chiron, and just kind of like, sharing, hey, what are our ideas about how we take care of ourselves? What ways do we go about making sure that we value ourselves, that we take care of ourselves, that we're doing our exercise, that we're eating properly, that we're creating boundaries and setting limits for ourselves that are appropriate. On the 21st of April, we have the Sun and Pluto in an opening square. They were originally conjunct on the 20th of January, just 3 months ago. Whatever was going on for you around that time, the first quarter square is considered a crisis in action. I like to think of it as one step forward and two steps back, or two steps forward and one step back. It's kind of a cautionary placement. And so we're talking about fixed energies too. So it might have to do with the ways we look at things, the way we're holding on to certain things, certain resources that maybe we don't need to hold on to anymore. Maybe we decided back in January to have a little bit more freedom, or we wanted to do more volunteer work, or we want to devote ourselves more to certain things that are in need in the human sphere. And then we kind of got lost in our path doing other things. Now with this opening square, it's kind of like saying, hey, do I really want to do those sacrifices? Do I really want to give up my free time and step away from laying on the sofa, drinking a glass of wine and eating grapes, and having to step out there and help at the soup kitchen or at the homeless shelter or wherever it is where people are in need. So this will be a real interesting time to see what shows up for people in this regard. On the 25th of April, we have Mercury finally stepping into a direct motion after going retrograde on the 1st of April. It's been 24 days of this. So we're going to feel things straighten out a little bit, a time when you can put the last 3 weeks worth of your researching, reviewing, reconsiderations into order and move forward with them. Be a really great time for that before we move into May and start to have more planets moving retrograde. On the 29th of April, Venus is leaving the very instinctual, active, action-oriented sign of Aries and moving into her home sign of Taurus, where she joins the Sun, Jupiter, and Uranus. Is quite the gang going on there. So the way we have our values, the way we shine out, the way we shock change, and the way we grow, expand, and have our philosophies are all rooted and fixed in the sign of Taurus, showing us a bit of a steadfastness. This is going to be a really hard group to get them to change their ideas of things. It helps, of course, that Uranus is in there, because Uranus understands that things need to go through change and that things need to happen. But again, this is the sign of Taurus. And I like to think when you deal with a bull, the best thing you could do is to put food in front of it and step away quietly. You don't want to push it. You don't want to pull it. You're not really going to get anywhere with it. On the 30th of April, good old Mars, who's been hanging out in the dreamy sign of Pisces, leaves and moves into his home sign of Aries, just like Venus just moved into her sign. We have the guys, we have Mercury, Mars, and Chiron all hanging out in the sign of Aries, showing us this instinctual manner that's going on. Great time to communicate things that are physically going on, maybe more about what our needs are and our desires and our drives, especially since Mars has been hanging out in that kind of dreamy space of Pisces and considering and fantasizing about things. Now that Mars has moved into Aries, it's a time to make things happen. As we know, Mercury just went direct as well. So these are the things, kind of just to mobilize one's forces and move forward with one's plans, really highly influenced by that period. Also on the 30th of April, we have a first quarter square. Venus is moving into that position with Pluto. They were together on the 17th of February. I firmly believe this has to do with our relationships and the ways in which we our values to things, right? Which is our relationships to people, our relationships to things, our relationships to food, our relationships to objects, our relationships to our clothing, our relationships to reading and writing, because I think of Taurus as being quite a publishing sign. But whatever is going on the 17th of February is up for review again and just saying, hey, what is it that we need to do? Are we doing this in the right possible way? Or do we need to readjust how we're going about doing this transformational means in which we're seeing things in this way? I want to thank you for watching this today. Please share with your friends. Please hit the thumbs up. Please hit like. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And also, please visit my website, coremichael.com. Please leave your comments, leave questions. I love hearing from you all. Thank you so much for following me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege to be of service to you all here. Thank you so much and have a wonderful April. Have a great day. Take care.